This week we're going to be speaking with my guy, Scooter Taylor. What's going on, Scooter?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm all good. How about you? How you doing?
I'm feeling good. I think, grateful to be here, grateful to be on. Feeling inspired. It's a good day. It's a good day to have
That's
a good
what.
day. So yeah,
That's
I'm feeling
what's
good,
up.
man.
All right, bet. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So, where you from?
I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised. If you've ever been to Memphis, it's an interesting little town, interesting little city, but very proud of it, very happy to be from there. So yeah, Memphis, man.
Most definitely. How was it growing up in Memphis?
Memphis is cool. I mean, like growing up, like pretty normal, right? Had the mom, dad, sister, childhood neighborhood friends, a product of the 90s, it feels like. So I wasn't, raised around technology too much.
Yeah.
Uh, and like had those opportunities to have like real good friendships, childhood friendships. I'd say, big piece of growing up, big part of it was martial arts, Taekwondo is where I actually started. I wasn't a sports guy in the sense where I made like basketball teams and stuff, but Taekwondo was my thing.
You
Third
get
degree black belt, and then
belts? Oh, black belt. Okay.
yeah, and then turned instructor into that, and a lot of my friends came from that circle as well. So I think growing up in Memphis was cool, man. Like I think there were normal childhood things, normal family things, right? Ups and downs of that. But I think overall pretty solid. I would say, was always encouraged to like do whatever I wanted to do, right? So there wasn't a moment where my parents or mom was like, you can't do something, right? Like ability wise, right? Like it's like, yo,
Yeah.
you can't go be a doctor, you can't go do what your dreams were. And I think that was super important and something I'll always be like very appreciative of.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, growing up in Memphis was cool, man. Like, I mean, you had like amazing barbecue culture, which we didn't really realize, having at the moment. Like now, it's funny to see, Memphis culture everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Mafia, Glorilla, the names go on and on and on, and just about how prominent Memphis culture is right now on main stage. But growing up, it's just kind of like everyday life.
Yeah. Facts. I recently just learned that your name isn't actually Scooter.
It's a household nickname that stuck, right? Everyone has called me Scooter that I've known for the longest, from like a family standpoint, and then it wasn't until seventh grade that they started calling me that in school. My mom put it on the application under my name by accident. So on the first day of school in like seventh grade, I go to this like new private school, super nervous because I'm just like, this academics are supposed to be hard. Like I'm like the only other black kid in class, right? And so first day of the roll, the teacher said like Scooter Taylor, and I was super nervous, right? Like super just embarrassed, just because no one had ever called me that in like a professional setting, I guess. But all the kids loved it, right? Like every kid came up and was like, dude, your name is Scooter, like that's so cool. And it made me feel cool at least, and we got through that, and then I just kept it, right. Got to college. I thought I was going to try to like switch back to my government name, but like it worked on campus. And then when I started to like get internships and jobs and stuff, I thought, okay, I really got to button up, right. I got to be this polished person, and Scooter stuck.
Yeah.
So from there it was just like, I've met former presidents of the United States at this point, right? And I've introduced myself as Scooter. So
Yeah.
it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. So when you were in high school, you started a YouTube channel.
I did, man. Like YouTube, I think was founded in what, like '06. It starts getting popular. I think my first YouTube video ever was like me cranking that Soldier Boy with my friends, like everybody else at one point. So it was just a cool little website. And this is MySpace. Facebook is just kind of coming in the picture here.
Yeah.
And what I really fell in love with, man, was video editing. One of my best buddies ever. His dad owned the Taekwondo school, right? So if you picture this, I'm black belt in Taekwondo. It's actually my job, right? So I'm like making money, getting paid like $10 an hour to like teach Taekwondo classes. And the guy's son is, there, and we become good friends. And I start seeing him editing on his Mac, and he's using iMovie, and he's making videos. And I'm like, yo, how are you doing that? And he's like, it's a MacBook, iMovie, blah blah blah. So I literally save up all my money, and I buy a Mac. And from there, me and him start making videos, just like trying to make like funny comedy videos and skits. And none of it's funny. I mean, we're like spending 12 hours a day on like filming, editing. We're uploading to YouTube, and we have like 10 views the next day. And like none of them are us, right? Like it's just us refreshing, trying to see how many views we have. So, that was like the introduction to YouTube. And then one day, we were sitting around, and we had just learned so many cool little apps on our MacBook, right? Like just cool things for us to do, that it was like, yeah, let's make a video about the cool things on our Mac. I think the first video might have been called something like, 10 best apps that we found on our MacBook or something. And, we put it up, and the next day it had like 130 views. And we're like, okay, like there's something, there's something here.
That's something.
And so from there, man, we just kept making videos. And at the time, we, probably didn't understand the magnitude of what was happening, right? Because it's like 2009, 2008, so like people aren't, calling it, creators or influencers or, all the stuff that you see now. But, things started happening, right? We get to 5,000 subscribers, we get to 10,000 subscribers. Like we ended up at 20,000 subscribers. We were getting paid by YouTube. We were getting like products sent to us like from OtterBox and stuff. And like, I'm 15, 16 emailing seemingly, corporations, right? Companies on the other end kind of.
And what year was this again?
This is like 08, right? 08, 09. We really started seeing some success. So like 2008, 2009, 2010, I go off to college in 2011. So yeah, so like those 3 years, right? We're just cranking out videos, and it's fun, right? It's not like a chore. It's not a thing of like work, right? We're just seeing it as like super fun, right? New app comes out, new thing that we're trying to do. And we start building community as well, right? Because you start getting subscribers, and they start really liking your videos, and they start posting like, yo, when's the next video? Or like, I need help with this, right? So we're starting to build this like really cool community online as well. And yeah, it was a blast, man. And like I said, YouTube had just come out with the partner program. And so we applied, and we got in. And I think our first, it was interesting because, you think like, oh man, we're about to get like so paid on YouTube. And I feel like we got like 10 cents like the first month, right? And then finally some checks started rolling in, and like we got to split some bread, but nothing that was like crazy life-changing. But I think something we were proud of, right? It's not like something definitely we're proud of. And I'll always, say like that was just an amazing time for doing it, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's crazy to kind of see the difference from then to now, because now people are making their whole lives off YouTube. It's people making, you had 20,000 subscribers, people making $20,000 a month off of YouTube. So it's crazy to see how with time that progressed.
Yeah, right. Like, I think we were starting to see remnants of it, right? Like you had, if you remember some of these early vloggers like Shay Carl, right? When he would film his family every day. So we were obviously tech reviewers. So we were reviewing like Apple products. We called it Macintosh Tips with a Z. And so, we were reviewing Apple products, but like the early days of like Marcus Brownlee, right? MKBHD, one of the biggest tech reviewers now, who sits down with like Tim Cook and Elon Musk. Like we were right there with him, right? Or in those early days. And so, I don't know if we knew where it could go, right? We also didn't have like, anyone in our ear being like, you're gonna do this, and like, it was fun, right? It really was fun. I think once college hit, and then my buddy, I think he got like engaged, and like, just like real life started to happen, and like we couldn't maybe be as consistent with the videos. Also we were tech reviewers, and Apple at the time was coming out with like a new product every like year. I mean, like it was like iPad 1, the iPad 2, Apple Watch, right? Like iPhone 5S, iPhone 6. And so, it was a push and pull with my mom, right? Being like, hey, I need the new iPhone again. And she's like, wait, no, you don't. Like, you just got
Yeah.
and I'm like, no, I need one. So that was an interesting time. But yeah, we were very proud of like everything that we did there with that.
Yeah, for sure. That's stuff. And you talk about college. Where'd you go to college? Where'd you choose to go after high school?
Yeah, so I ended up going off to Morehouse, right after college, which is probably one of the best decisions ever. I got to shout out my sister on that one. She went to an Ivy League school, and she called home one day, and she was just like, "Yo, like I'm on my internship on Wall Street, and the HBCU kids are killing it, right? They're actually doing really well in the internship, and they're having probably way more fun at their school. So you should probably think about going to an HBCU." And at the time I was going to this like predominantly white high school, all boys, and she's like, there's a predominantly black, right? Like all boy, all male school called Morehouse, right, in Atlanta. And I was like, bet like that sounds very comfortable, sounds very, sounds like a good experience. Let's try it out. And then I actually had a bunch of friends going. So like my first friend ever was already, let's go in. My neighbor was already down there. He was a year ahead of me. We had other people in our like network that was already like there or going. So it was like very comfortable, easy decision to kind of say like, I'm gonna head to Morehouse, and I'm really glad I did. I didn't tour either. So like my first time ever in Atlanta was on Move It Day, which is kind of crazy to think about. I don't know if I recommend that to people to do, but I didn't go tour Morehouse, right? Didn't even go see it, didn't see the facilities. I picked like a random roommate. I was just like real, 18, just trying to like high off life, trying to go down there. But sure, I was probably already on a really good track, right? Where, I went to a nice high school, like got a great education, had, supportive parents and stuff like that. And like was probably going to be on a great trajectory. But like, I think the HBCU experience probably like accelerated that. And then also maybe just gave me a broader perspective of like what I could achieve. I think like you know, so often we grow up in spaces where like white is the standard, right? Like white is normal, right? Whatever we see is typically in success, right? We see it done from this like white perspective. And so like going to Morehouse was like amazing because it was like, man, these are all people that look like me, right? And I'm not the only one, right? Like if you like think about it, high school, you were the second Black student council president, right? The school has been around since 1860 something, right? Or 1890 something. And you were the second Black student council president in 2011. Okay. You get to Morehouse and you're like, holy crap, I'm surrounded by 3,000 other, right? Like smart Black people who are also student council presidents and who are also at the top of their game. So it was a really cool moment to just kind of understand that like we can achieve without having this like pressure of representing like our whole race, but also like we can achieve, even surpass what we've seen our white counterparts do, right? Like I've got friends who were, getting internships on Wall Street, traveling the country, traveling around the world, starting companies, right? Doing all these amazing things. And when you look at it, you're like, man, you guys are actually, I'm inspired by you all, and you're all actually like broadening again my perspective of what's even possible without this like idea of I've got to like achieve this like the standard, right? Like we're breaking a whole new mold, if that makes sense. But so like I think that was like phenomenal. And I think overall too, right? Just friends for a lifetime, right? Like I met some of my best friends on like day one, you know what I'm saying, in the dorm room in the hall, and like you kind of have those experiences with people, right, in the trenches of trying to get to financial aid and just trying to pass a class. And so to now see these folks with like families and in positions and directors and like I said, running things, it's really special. So that's my ad for an HBCU. For sure.
For Morehouse.
Yeah, that's what I have more. Any of them though, man. I don't think you can go wrong. There's beauty in every one of them. The history is so rich in all of these HBCUs. So, obviously partial to Morehouse, right? But it's all love.
Yeah. And I like what you said, like basically when you got to Morehouse, you didn't have to worry about the white gaze. Like everything wasn't seen through the white gaze. You got to actually just focus on being the best you and not worry about being the best Black kid. Or
right. I think there's like this subtle pressure that we probably all face, right? And I think that's why I love what you're doing with Hella Inspired, right? Because you get to like learn where you're like, oh man, like I had no idea that XYZ person was actually behind this or invented this, or the real story of how groundbreaking, right, the achievements of some of these people who look like me, right? And so I think, again, if you're not brought up in that environment, right, like there's some people that are brought up in that environment, right, where their parents are, teaching them the history and telling them this, and like really, they're learning their history from, day one.
Yeah, you know
But
my
there's some
mom.
people from communities where you don't actually know that, right? You're learning about Black history the first time you're learning about it. It's about slavery, right? And you're learning about it in your classroom with, your white counterparts, right? And, you're hearing lectures and speakers from, again, people that maybe don't look like you, right? And so, it can be interesting. And then when you actually find out, you're like, whoa, there's actually, a whole bunch of people, right, who've exceeded everyone's expectations and achieved way more than maybe some of these people are even thinking about, right?
Yeah,
It's beautiful to see. And so I think, like I said, at Morehouse, you definitely got that. And the diversity of it too, right? You had kids from different socioeconomic backgrounds, right? You had kids different like talent levels, right? It's just like is lots of diversity, right? Obviously in Blackness, and you see that in at HBCU for sure.
yeah, most definitely. Water Wars ATL. You
Oh,
attempted to do the biggest water balloon fight ever.
yeah, yeah. um, yeah, man. I mean, so Water Wars ATL, where do I start? So I think, coming off the YouTube thing, I'm in college and I'm looking around and I'm like, I'm bored, right? Like, we're just supposed
Yeah,
to go to classes, we're supposed to like join these organizations that are kind of poorly run. And so I'm kind of coming off this confidence of like, yeah, I just had 20,000 subscribers. I'm sick with the video editing, marketing. Instagram is just popping up on the scene at the time. This is like 2011, 2012. And I see this video for the world's largest water balloon fight. And I'm like, we should try that, right? Like, we should try to beat this record. It was hosted by the University of Kentucky. And I was like, Atlanta could beat the record, right? If you think about it, Atlanta has so many different colleges: Agnes Scott, Morehouse, Spelman, Georgia Tech, Georgia State, right? Kennesaw, right? All these different colleges, right? Like, we could just bring everyone together and we could break the world record for the world's largest water balloon fight, right? 12,000 people, 300,000 water balloons. Like, yes, let's do that. And so to me, it was a natural moment where I was like, this makes sense. And I think I have the skills to actually go try it. Now, granted, I'm a freshman, I'm in work study, and I just start jumping into action, right? Like, open up a Google Doc. I think I called the University of Kentucky. I found an organization that like actually had the record, and they were actually like a Christian student fellowship.
yeah,
And so they were like super nice, and they were like, oh, like Jesus told us that we should help you out. And so we literally got like all the different inside scoop on how they actually executed.
yeah,
And, I think looking back, right, like it was that startup spirit, right, entrepreneurial spirit that I guess I've honed now. But I like at the moment, it was like, no one's telling me like, I can't do this, right? Let's just keep going, keep firing. And, one of my good buddies who ended up actually working with me on this project, Jared, he was an international studies major. And so, I'm sitting there and I'm telling him all these plans, and he's like, yo, but there's a world's water crisis going on. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. Like, what do you mean? Like, what?
yeah,
And he educates me on this like world water crisis, right? There's millions of people, right? Billions of people who actually lack access to clean drinking water around the world. And I think now, right, in 2023, where we sit right now, obviously, you hear about it. It's actually a domestic water crisis, right? Flint, Michigan, Mississippi, even Memphis, right? Like, every city now is kind of having this, murmurs of like, check your water supply, like, but 2011, 2012, it wasn't as domestic, or at least on the forefront. And it was like, man, okay, is there an opportunity to just combine these efforts, right? Like, we can raise so much awareness if we actually broke a world record, right? And then if we actually had everyone donate like $5 to participate, we could build, I don't know how many wells, right? 5 or 6 wells in sub-Saharan Africa, right? And so that was the idea, right? Let's break a world record for charity. And, this is like my freshman year. And so my idea is like, cool, I'm gonna do this every year in college, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then
yeah,
we'll just travel around the country breaking world records, right? That was like the big vision. And we failed miserably. I think we got all the balloons for free,
yeah,
but like, execution wise, right, we and again, I'm like 19 running around Atlanta trying to figure out how to like do this, right? Like we need the space and like we gotta work with the city government. And like I'm running into opposition, right? Like I'm running into people who are just like, why are you trying to do this? Like you're young, like what are you doing? And so there was more people trying to like stop versus like open the gates to do it. And so we kind of ran out of time in terms of like finding a location. And it was the worst feeling ever. Like I think I cried probably like 2 days straight. And just felt like this complete like failure, right? Because it's like, man, I've spent literally all these people have spent so much time actually promoting this thing. People were supporting, people were excited. We had an amazing marketing campaign, like so many things I could control. We got the balloons for free, right? We actually went to Kentucky and like participated in their water balloon fight because they do it every year. Mm-hmm. And we still couldn't pull it off. And that just really hurt, right? I think that was one of the first like moments from an entrepreneur side of getting like hit in the mouth, right? And like having to taste your own blood, like, it sucks. But and when I think the big lesson out of it all was, try to continue to try to keep the main thing, right? Like that's a super important piece of like truly remember your why and like why you're doing things. And I think, at the beginning or when you're in it, you're so fixated on the end result, right? Like, and so many moments in my mind where I had envisioned water balloons flying around and like 12,000 people. And I just was like, I can see it, right, in my mind. And I think, but seeing that made me lose sight of like the larger goal, right? The whole goal was to raise awareness about, clean drinking water around the world, right? And once we didn't do the water balloon fight, there was a moment of probably like a week later where I was like, well, my birthday's coming up and like, forget it. I don't want gifts. I just want people to donate to the water crisis, right? Because like, that's still the main thing. And I think we raised maybe a little over $1,000 in like, I don't know, 12 hours, right? And so I did that maybe for the next like 3 or 4 years. And, I think I'll have to like put a picture on the screen, but like we actually built a well in sub-Saharan Africa and like some kids like drew us a picture of them and told us thank you and stuff like that. So, it was an amazing experience again. People still reach out to me and they're like, you gotta do that water balloon fight. But first experience that just like I thought was gonna go so well and it didn't. And that, it hurt. But as I've learned, you gotta fail like 17,000 more times before you hit success.
Yeah. So. But the thing about that is instead of, even though you say you were down for a few days, you still pivoted and then you made something happen. You still achieved the goal that you set out to achieve. It may not have happened in the way that you wanted it through the water balloon fight, but the end goal still was achieved. So
exactly, right? Like like I said, you got to keep the main thing. And like, at the time, like, where I'm not like, oh, we got to pivot. And like, it was not this like genius whiteboard moment of like, oh wait, like team, let's do, I'm like, I'm down. Like I'm literally crying. Like I'm literally just like moping, like what was life, right? But it happened, right? And I think again, to your point, like there is some level of resilience there, a level of learning how to pivot, and just understanding there's literally, several ways to the top of the mountain, right? I think that's just like the big thing. And when you're doing anything creative, entrepreneurial, or anything that you're passionate about, you have to keep that in mind, right? Like there's literally always several different paths to the top of the mountain. And, you gotta like believe that, because otherwise you'll quit the minute you like actually hit an obstacle,
Facts. So from Memphis to Morehouse, what was next?
Oh man, Memphis to Morehouse to San Francisco, Silicon Valley. So I think again,
from the Bay.
Yeah, to the Bay, man. Shout out to you, right? Yeah, Memphis, Morehouse, and then San Francisco, literally in that order. So, while I'm at Morehouse again, I'm able to see people that look like me achieving things that are in alignment with what I'm trying to do, right? And I think coming off the YouTube thing, coming off the water project, like I had this idea like, man, I really want to actually like go build and do this startup thing, right? I had an internship at a big tech company and it was cool. But then I was like, man, I really love the scrappiness of a startup. And I think my sister at the time was like starting to work in startups, like the Facebook movie had come out, right? So, there's this idea of like, oh yeah, we could all build a startup in like 2 hours, right? Like Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
be successful. And so I think, got hip to the startup bug, and I started interning at one of the largest startups at that time. It was called Yik Yak, right? So you might have heard of Yik Yak. It was a social media app, real controversial, but they were number one in the App Store, and they were building it right in Atlanta. And I had met the founders. And actually, I pitched the founders about the water balloon fight, right? So I actually went up to them and was like, yo, I'm trying this water balloon fight. I failed a couple times, and you guys could actually do it, right? You've got the venture funding. You also have the number one app on every college campus. This would be a no-brainer. He slides me his email, but as a typical college kid, I actually lose it. And so it wasn't until months later where I needed an internship, and one of my buddies actually, he had gotten rejected from Yik Yak, and from an intern or a job offer. And I was like, oh, I met those guys, but I don't have their email. And so luckily he just gave me their email. He was like, yo, here's the email. And I emailed him and was like, yo, remember me? It's, Scooter. I'm looking for an internship and would love to come work with you guys. And yeah, next thing you know, the next week I was interning, right? So I was inside of a really cool startup, ground floor. They had no more than maybe 15 people on the team. And, we're just in there hustling every day, right? Working on this company. And very quickly, I noticed again, this confidence, right? That comes from the HBCU world, I think, or just that was instilled, and this courage of yo, I can do this, right? I'm looking at these two 25-year-old white kids who just graduated college, they're no older than me, but they're also not smarter than me, right? You know what I'm saying? We put our pants on the same way. I can actually go do this. I can go achieve this. This isn't something that only they can go do. So very quickly I was like, man, I think I can go start a startup. I don't know what that idea is, but I definitely could do this. And I think I want to go do this one day, right? I've got great ideas. How do I go put them in? And lo and behold, man, literally once school was finishing, I got a chance to actually go start a company. And we actually went to Y Combinator, and it was called Look Live. And so that was an amazing opportunity. I was working with, investors and angel investors, and we had a pretty stacked team of folks, man.
And what was Look Live?
Yeah, so Look Live was an app and a website where basically you could shop the fashion of your favorite celebrities. So we understood how to take paparazzi photos and tell you exactly what they were wearing in the photo, so you could buy that exact item. But then we also showed you the look for less, right? You could also buy the cheaper, more affordable option. So Saint Laurent jacket, but you can buy the same kind of jacket at Zara or H&M. And so it was a platform for fashion and style. And yeah, I became co-founder and CEO of that. And this was 2016, right? So at this moment, I'm doing it, I'm okay, here we go. Everything that I've learned from YouTube days, from the Water Wars days, from just the days on the internship at that startup, it's all starting to apply right here, right? All the leadership skills that I've learned over the right here, here's the moment. Yeah, it was a crazy time. I was a part of that company from 2016 to right when the pandemic started, or right before the pandemic in 2020. And I made every mistake, right, as CEO, right? It was my first time being a CEO of a venture-backed startup. So I was pretty horrible at investor relations, didn't understand how to handle conflict with co-founders, horrible at delegating, just a lot of different things that maybe I could write a list about of things I was bad at. I think I do, pat myself on the back for even just being in the arena and doing it. But I learned so much, right? Just literally going through it. I think as wild as it sounds, right? Those are some of the wildest times, and literally some days where you're I don't know if we're going to make payroll. I don't, I'm not going to pay myself so that we pay the team. There's days where it looks bleak, but then there's also some amazing wins in there, right? We, got investment from Morgan Stanley, and our, logos on the side of Times Square, right? And we're getting retweeted by Virgil Abloh, rest his soul, and and all these different cool people are shouting us out, Tiana Taylor and XYZ, right? So we're having these really cool moments of the app growing. We had a lawsuit in there, right? We actually got sued by the paparazzi, right? So there's so many things that just happened in there, ups and downs of a roller coaster of starting a company.
Yeah.
Again, I wouldn't trade those times for at all. And like, it's kind of weird. Like I'd go back to them too. I think, like I'd actually try it again and do it again. Like they were super fun. Even in the moment though, it was very stressful. Like,
Yeah. Sued by the paparazzi?
obviously copyright's a real thing. And so the whole bulk of the business was like taking these photos and trying to make sure they were shoppable. And I think like every startup, right? Like in the beginning, you're just kind of moving fast and you're kind of like, we'll cross that bridge when it happens. And it finally happened. I mean, we got hit with like this crazy cease and desist letter, literally asking for like $300,000. And so
They
it was a
took
really interesting moment on like how to navigate this, right? Like we actually don't have the money to in the bank. We don't have the money to even fight this and get a lawyer, right? Like there's so many different things. And so, a few things that we did, we actually tried to just have a business to business conversation. So like, I was the entrepreneur and like I was talking to the lawyer and I'm like, we're not getting anywhere. Can I just actually speak to the other person that's like suing me? And what was so crazy was he actually liked our business. Like when I actually got on the phone with him, he was like, yo, I love your business. This is amazing. And like, it looks real clean. And I don't want you to steal my photos, but like, I actually love it. And I'm like, okay, we should just partner then. Like, how do we partner and you actually provide us the photos versus you actually like suing us, right? Like, let's actually try to do this together. And it was wild, man. We had to invite him to Atlanta so he could see that we were just like some broke young adults who were just trying to make this thing work. We weren't actually, I think people read, headlines and articles about raising funding or, who your investors are, and they think you're just rich, right? And it's like, no, we're actually still trying to figure this out. So we had to like invite him to Atlanta. I had to like fly out and meet him one time randomly because he wouldn't actually just jump on the phone with me. Like I kept missing his calls or, he'd
pull
be
up on
busy.
them.
And so one day I literally was like, hey, I'll be there next week. And he's like, oh, well, let's meet in person. And I literally hung the phone up, bought a ticket on Delta and was out there like the next week. And so, things like that are just like, you don't learn that stuff in the textbook. And like, really through experience, you got to go do it. And like, after sitting in a room with him for like 6 hours, we finally got to a partnership. So that was really cool, but wild time.
Yeah. So from 2016 to 2020, year with Look Live. In 2020, the pandemic hit. How did that affect everything?
Yeah. So, honestly, you gotta like trust the timing of your life, right? Like I think no one could have planned the pandemic, and hopefully the pandemic taught us that like we can't necessarily plan like every detail and how our life's gonna go. Like things are just gonna happen, either for the worse or for the better, right? And so there was a moment in Look Live where I just knew I had to go do something different, right? The lawsuit took us out, really hurt the business model. I think there's also a time in startups where you look around the table and like everyone's just kind of tired, right? Like your team is tired, your investors are tired, and like it's like, all right, it's maybe time just to go move on and go do something next. Like I'm still pretty young, like I'm under 25 here, 20, whatever, however old I am, and I still have energy, right? Like I think I'm going to try the next thing. And so that was a tough decision, and I think there were people that were maybe giving me advice that I should leave, should have left earlier, right? And then there's some people that are like, no, you got to stay and like stick it out. And again, that's why I say like trust the timing in your life, because I left, I think, at just this like precise time. So it was January 2020 when I officially leave. And kind of a rough time, right? Because again, if we go back in the story, right, I'm coming off of this, kind of failed water balloon fight, but like I picked myself back up and now I've got this like startup CEO mentality, and I'm thinking like we're gonna go sell this company for billions of dollars. And like, the sobering reality is just that's not happening. And I'm actually having to shut the company down and leave. And like there's just this moment of like identity crisis, or like, who am I? Like, am I actually as good as I say I am? Like, maybe this isn't in the cards. Like, should I go get a job? Like, all my friends are on vacations and they're starting to buy their houses and they're meeting their wives and stuff like that from Morehouse. And like, like maybe I'm behind, right? I've been paying myself like very little every couple months just because like I had this dream that, we're going to build this big company. And now that's over. And so I was literally in LA couch surfing, and this is 2020, so the Kobe Bryant incident happens, I'm here, but I'm starting to see that the pandemic is like starting to happen, like in the spread of the virus. And I actually go home for my mom's birthday dinner, right? So I fly to Memphis. This is like March 13th, 2020. I fly home and we have dinner. And I think at the dinner, I'm also like announcing that, like, by the way, I left this one company that I've been working on for 4 years, trying to break that down there. After the birthday dinner, literally the next day, I'm supposed to fly out and all planes are grounded, right? And there's a shelter in place mandate for the coming weekend, right? So if you think back, it's like, literally no one is flying anywhere and we all have to stay in the house this weekend. And so one of my buddies reaches out and says, yo, man, like there's a conference and this conference was actually going to be in person, but they switched it to virtual. And he's like, we should just go check it out. Like what exactly what that means. And I had never been to a virtual conference, didn't know what that was. And I get on the platform and it's super dope, right? There's breakout sessions and like this speed networking. And like, it was just this really cool moment where I was like meeting people from like London, right? Talking about marketing virtually. And I was like, man, this is dope. And I instantly text them back. I'm like, we should do this for like Black creatives and entrepreneurs, right? Like I know so many dope people, whether it be in LA or Morehouse, Atlanta, DC, Texas, wherever. I know all these cool people, but they should know each other, right? We should actually bring them all together for like a conference and we can all just meet each other and just, we're about to be in the house anyway. There's nothing else to do. Right. And so I literally text them that. I think I tweet about it and people start retweeting me and they're like, yo, like, that's dope. Like, we should do it. Like, come on, like, let's make it happen. I would pull up to that. And maybe 4 days later, we had planned a full conference with like speakers, branding. We had, registration was open. It was a free conference. And 4 days later, literally, from the time that we had that first conversation that said like, yep, we should do this weekend. Mm-hmm. Like literally 4 days later, we had 5,000 people show up virtually. And so at that moment, I was like, okay, this is my next thing. I don't know what this is about to be, but I think this is, again, aligned to me, right? I think there was a moment where I had to just really honestly, kind of make that serious moment of like, you are an entrepreneur, right? Like you're not gonna go get a regular 9-to-5 job here. So like we're gonna figure this out. I don't know exactly what it's gonna be, but you'll know it when you see it. You know what I'm saying? And so and you kind of feel it, right? And so that feeling that I wanted from the water balloon fight, right? That feeling I had from YouTube, the feeling I had from running that first startup, right? Like when I see 5,000 people having a good time and like learning and like listening to these speakers and like building community, I'm like, oh, this is it, right? This is very valuable. And I think this can be something amazing. And so we went all in, and that's what we're working on now. But yeah, so that's how the pandemic affected everything. It was actually again, like you have to trust the timing of your life, right? Like I would have never predicted a global pandemic. I would have never predicted, obviously, that I'd be, facilitating a conference with 5,000 people virtually. You can't plan those things. I think you just also have to like position yourself and stay in the ocean, right? And stay ready. And so, I think some of that looks like, we were curious, right? We were curious to just even research and check out what a virtual conference was, right? I could have easily not been to the virtual conference and just kind of like chilled and, went to the bar and went drinking or something like that, right? But like staying curious was amazing. I think that same spirit that I had maybe, for the water balloon fight of like, we're about to do this. Let me call up Kentucky. Let me get the water balloons for free. Like that hustle, right? We obviously implemented that in the 4-day span where it was like, this is dope. We should do this now. Let's execute. And, coming off of the startup mentality too, right? Like, I think one thing people maybe don't, I think one thing that like maybe people don't get when they're inside of something and they're building something is like the outside world is not that intense, right? Like when you're building something from the ground up and you're trying to be an entrepreneur, it's like, it's every day, right? Every day you're up, you're thinking about it, you eat, sleep, you breathe it. And then when you pull away from that, you're like, whoa, people actually go walk in the park, and people
Yeah,
go
like it's not like you can breathe. You can go get.
like people actually go do things for fun, and like they spend like hours just like without trying to go to a meeting. Like that's mind-boggling, right? So I think I had jumped out of that environment with my startup, and there was a couple of days, like there was a couple of months obviously before the pandemic where I was like, oh man, like okay, like I can maybe slow down. I don't want to, but like I guess I can, and like let me try to understand that. And then, but once the 5,000 people happened again, I was like, oh, wait, no, I'm back, right? And so I had that intensity to just like execute and let's go. So, so many lessons I think in that that we can break down. But yeah, that was kind of the journey from shutting down Look Live to, the pandemic for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. So after that first event with 5,000 people, was that just a one-time thing, or did you guys make something out of that?
Oh, dude, we did an event like 2 days later, right? We just kept doing events.
Yeah.
Like again, we were in the house. There was nothing else to do. We couldn't go anywhere. So it was literally like, you go to the restaurant, you pick up the food, wear a mask, and then like go back to the house and just
Mhm.
keep working. So like literally up all day, all night, thinking of events. And so a couple things happened, right? Like number one, we had 5,000 emails of some of the world's like most creative people and entrepreneurs and builders and professionals, and they were all connected now, right? They were all kind of like getting to know each other, following each other on Instagram, making new friends. And so we just kept doing events for that group, right? And so we did, pitch competition, right? We worked with a venture capital fund out of Atlanta, and we actually gave away like maybe like $15,000 maybe, or maybe it was 50. I don't know. We gave away a lot of money, but we gave away all this like cash for like a pitch competition. We did mental health days. We did career fairs. So we worked with like different companies, and we actually had their recruiters on talking to people, and people were like getting job offers, and like people were actually like putting their resume out. We did so many different talks with creatives. So we did all these events, right? I probably did like 50 or 60 just for like our friends. And we just kept thinking of ideas. It's like, oh yeah, we should do that. And we'd like make a flyer, and we'd get some speakers, and we just kept like rinse and repeating. And so that was like an amazing thing. But then another thing happened, right? People started to reach out to us, and they were like, yo, you're doing this virtual event. We don't know what we're doing. Can you help us? So then it was like, oh yeah, we can be like a production company, right? And we can actually manage the technology because we understand how to use the tech platform.
Mhm.
We can produce the event, so we know how to like set the cameras up and put the graphics on the screen, and we can do customer support, right? Like when your speakers are using the wrong browser, they can call us and we can like help them get on the thing, right? So like the things we were doing for ourselves, people wanted us to do that for them.
So where did you get the name West Peak from?
It's really a shout out to our college days, right? So, truth be told, living on campus got super expensive. And my mom sent me to Atlanta one summer and said, you need to find a place to live that's cheap. And so one of my buddies actually had a house, and it was on West Peak Road. And, he allowed me and a couple other friends to stay in the crib. And naturally, like every other college kid, we threw parties. So we did a lot of day parties, and we just had a lot of fun in the house, right? And it was obviously a place that we could bring friends, but like truth be told, it was a lot of like sitting around and dreaming up and just being like, man, when we get on, right? Like what you do with your friends, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
and so we were like, yeah, like why not? And like, literally just happened very organically, but very quickly, where our first client was a good friend of mine, L'Oreal. Shout out to L'Oreal. Basically referred us, and I think we charged maybe like $1,200, right? Because it was like, why not? And we
Yeah.
have a little bit of bills, but like, why not? We also just didn't know what we could charge. But then, literally, man, I mean, one event after the next, like, okay, now we're charging 5K. Now we're charging 10K. Okay, now we're charging 40K. Okay, now we're charging 120K, right? So it's like, whoa, okay, this is amazing. And we've done probably 500 events since March 2020, and we've worked with some of the biggest brands like Nike, AT&T, Morehouse, different presidential foundations. Yeah, it's been really, really awesome and rewarding. But we built a really cool production marketing agency kind of from that moment, right? Like literally from that moment of texting him, like, yo, we should do this for our friends. And then, it kind of blossomed into that. And the failure of the water balloon fight, right? The mental picture of like, oh my gosh, I want to be around 12,000 people and like I want to break this world record and do something amazing. There was some satisfaction in some of that satisfaction and just seeing all my friends and like 5,000 people like on these like different conferences every week, right? And that was like really rewarding, right? I think from that first startup in Look Live being like, man, there's no money in the bank. We're struggling to figure this out. We're getting sued. Like, just can't catch a break. Like, there's ups, there's downs, right? To holy cow, like we're on track to do like 7 figures in 12 months, right? Like, this is more money than I've even like thought about like making all of this, like what the heck? And it's all ours, right? There's no outside investor capital. This is literally just like our cash, right? And I'm sitting at home eating Chipotle every day. So like the burn rate, like, there's no expenses, right? And I'm in my pajamas, right? Like I'm also not having to go to a corporate office. Like I'm literally just like doing this from my childhood room where I used to make YouTube videos, right? So there's so many like moments in this whole story that, again, trusting the timing of your life, right? Being able to just like have the courage and the audacity to just be like, yo, like I'm gonna go do and try these things. And then like truly understanding, even if it means you have to cry for like 4 days straight, that like, the experiences you're going through will help you later, right? And I think, I'm still learning that, but
Yeah, most definitely. And it's crazy to peep the differences of how people were living during COVID, because I know me, I was in 10th going to 11th grade, and I was waking up at like 5 p.m., going to sleep at 10 on the game every day. So
yeah, and there's so many, there's so many different stories, right? Of what happened during the pandemic. And like, honestly, man, I'm having to kind of sometimes even now, like go back and still just kind of unwind, right? Because while it was a moment of like reflection and just like chilling for some people, I was so wound up. I was like on call like all the time. And so no, I totally get that. But it was fun. Like it didn't feel like work. And I think like, that's something that pushes me, right? Like I think now kind of even achieving the success that I've achieved in this kind of thing, like it really has shifted my perspective of like, okay, yeah, this is what success means to me, right? It's not actually about, breaking the world record or making $1 million, right? It's actually about like just being able to maybe own my time, work with people that I enjoy, work on things that are gonna like help other people and impact the world and like leave our stamp in a good way. Like those are things that get me excited. And if I do those things, right, if I work with good people, if I work on things that I'm like interested in and can help other people, if I can kind of like own my time and I feel good about the work, like it doesn't feel like a chore. Then the money and the success and the accolades and the blah 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 blah, like that stuff will come. So that's kind of where I'm at in the mindset right now, at least at 30.
I know you've heard of ChatGPT and you've seen Apple announce their new AR goggles. How do you think that's going to change the landscape of your business or other businesses out there that are functioning virtually?
Yeah, I mean, again, we started virtual production right in the heart of the pandemic, right? And so it was awesome. But now the world is back to a new normal where they're back outside. And so I think we have to evolve with it. Our big bet is staying at the intersection of technology and events, right? And so I think if you think about it, we were at that intersection when it came to virtual production and then just doing all the different platforms and just making sure that we could translate an in-person conference to the virtual world. I think now I still want to stay at that intersection of tech and events. And so to your point, Apple coming out with these like, Vision Pro goggles, I think there's a term that everyone knows called metaverse, but these like 3D kind of AR, VR experiences, I think are the future, right? I think it's going to just actually make a lot more things accessible, right? People who can't travel now get to experience kind of events in the same way that maybe, people kind of can experience when they actually go out in person, right? I think it's also going to take education to the next level, right? Like just children and just people being able to learn in like an immersive way. I think that's going to also change the landscape. And so as a company, right, we want to be at that intersection and kind of skate to that puck. I don't know if, again, if I'm in alignment, right, of those three things, right, working with good people, working on things I like and enjoy and passionate about that make impact, and then also just being able to like enjoy what I do. For me, right, in-person production, maybe like scaling up, getting the big cameras, being on site with all the cords, right? Like that's cool, but I don't know if that's like me, right? Versus like, oh man, we get to actually maybe create some game-changing technology and use it in an amazing, new, fresh, innovative way, right? We can actually have a graduation that's in the metaverse, or we can actually host a gala for a college, right? And it be like this 3D, virtual immersive like experience. And we can actually have alum who've never been to campus since they graduated come back to campus in this like 3D like immersive space. Like that's amazing, right? To me. And I think that's where we want to be as a company. So yeah, we're making that bet. I think my big idea here, I can share this one, I guess. My big idea is I think there's going to be twin virtual cities, right? I think we're actually going to see like twin replicas of cities, right? Think of Paris, Las Vegas, Tel Aviv, Atlanta, Memphis, and you can actually go visit these cities from your couch, right? Think about how many people who never will get a chance to go travel to these places, but they now get to go do it, right? From their couch, and they get to maybe learn, and they get to walk around, and they get to actually like experience the sights, right? And like hear the sounds of what it's like to be in Cairo, Egypt, right? And I think what's really interesting about that when you talk about the introduction of AI to all of this, right, is now you get to also kind of have these conversations, right, with people, whether it be real people or kind of like digital kind of NPCs that actually get to understand you, understand what you're doing. And so imagine now being able to put on these goggles, right? Travel to Barcelona, right? Or travel to Montreal and sit down at a dinner table and try to order speaking French. And the waiter actually helps correct your French right there, right? And now you actually get better. I think that's just like a world we're about to move to and live in. And I think to me, that promotes a really awesome future. I don't get scared by that and say like, oh man, we're all going to be robots and like we're going to be so plugged in that we're going to miss human interaction. I think there is obviously going to be a need for balance, but the idea that like, there's a kid in Memphis right now, right, who can go experience what Tokyo, Japan is like from his couch, and maybe that expands his mind into being a animator or being, whatever he wants to go be. I think that's like pretty special, and we shouldn't try to limit that. So yeah.
Well, definitely. And I know you said that there's multiple fears out there and there's a need for balance. So what do you have to say to Auntie out there who said that she's not giving OpenAI any of her information, or any of these companies none of her information, that she doesn't want AI or virtual reality to take over the world?
For sure. I think I think we have to honestly look at what's behind those fears, right? Like, and I think a lot of it may just be lack of exposure or like understanding. And so we need more people who understand these technologies, can go into different communities and like break them down and understand the benefits too, right? Because the gap is widening, right? There are people right now who are on the other end of that spectrum and using AI to become millionaires and change their whole life around, right? Versus you have some people who are too afraid to even go to the website and try it out, right? And so I think, unfortunately, especially if those people look like me and you, it's like, no, we need them to actually come a little bit to the left, right? Like, I need you to actually like experience it and understand how this can actually improve your life and how this can actually 10x, 100x what you're doing, right? Before you get really left behind and the gap is even wider, right? And so I think we need more people like yourself, right, with these platforms who are able to like go in and just, like I said, explain and just kind of say like, okay, let's think about it, right? You maybe been, like you've actually been using AI this whole time, right? You didn't know it, right? Like you use Siri. Okay, that's a form of AI. Your Gmail can detect spam. That's a form of AI, right? You're also driving a Tesla, Auntie. Like That's a machine learning and AI, right? So like, I think like once we start to break some of these things down, I think from there, we get to hopefully just have a more fruitful conversation. But then I think again, we have to also respect and understand that, we can't let aunties information get in the hand of bad actors, right? And so we do have to keep the folks and the open AIs and all these different folks, right, like honest about what they're doing with their data, and making sure they are actually being like good actors, right? And so yeah, so that's how I think about that, right? Like again, I'm a big pro tech fan, but I do, I don't want to just leave that person behind, right? Because there's gonna be a point where they have to catch up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
What does inspiration mean to you?
It's a great question. What does inspiration mean to me? I think it's a feeling, right? Like it's a feeling that you get when you're inspired, right? And I think ideally it's this feeling that you recognize when you're like, man, I see myself in that, right? Or I see myself, or I see just like, I don't want to say the word perfection. Maybe like love is the right word, right? But like, it's like, a glimpse of like God's love, right? I think it's just like, I said, do some amazing things. Oh my gosh, right? I'm inspired, right? We go see, a coach take a Colorado football team from nothing to something, right? Like, whoa, we're inspired, right? And so, I think it's a feeling that we see when we see things, right? And we're like, man, like, at least to me, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
whoa, I get to go, like, I can go do that, or I can go like attempt to go put my spin on something just like this person did. I think that's what gets me inspired, for sure.
Most definitely. What is one way that you want to inspire the next generation?
Yeah, one way I want to inspire the next generation. I think I want the next generation to hopefully look at me or the stuff that we're doing, and they get to just kind of say like, man, I get to like achieve and succeed just being completely myself, right? Like I don't have to change my name and hide my nickname. I don't have to hide the hometown I'm ashamed of or I'm from. I don't have to, work on things that honestly don't bring me joy, right? And so hopefully there's this sense that people are like, man, I get to like authentically be myself and like authentically tap into my story and like still win, because that's what, Scooter and team are doing, have done, and they were able to make a great impact on the world, right? And so I think, when I sit here, there's nothing really crazy difficult that I've done or just like different that I've done from the YouTube days, right? Being in high school,
Yeah.
like being able to take ideas, break them down, put them on the internet, right? Being able to, galvanize people and rally behind ideas, make an impact. Like those are things that again I was trying to do in high school and college, and like luckily still getting to do that at 30. And so yeah, I just hope people like understand that, right? Like you don't have to be different, or you don't need something that is outside of you to go achieve, right? Like you literally have everything you need. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some patience. It's going to, again, probably take a lot of failures, but you're going to get to where you want to go, especially if you're just authentically yourself, right? And you have those core values that you are tapped in, and right. And so I think and rooted in. And so I think that's ideally what I want to like leave, and hopefully that inspires the next person to go do like crazier things than I've ever done or thought of even doing.
Most definitely. All right. Perfect. So, all right. So I just want to say I appreciate you. And you're one of the main reasons I started doing this and everything after that talk we had in Montreal. And you've taught me a lot of game, gave me a lot of games. So I just want to say I appreciate you, and I appreciate you for stopping by.
Oh man, of course, man. Have me on again. I'm launching a podcast as well, so I'd love to have you on. Why not? But no, I mean, like, I appreciate those words. I think, um, you're doing it, right? You're doing the work, right? And I think that's inspiring in itself, right? The fact that I've seen you literally go from, hey, here are my ideas on a piece of paper and like in my notes on my phone, to now we're actually here and like seeing it work, and people you don't even know are like learning about the brand and learning about the platform. So by all means, man, like keep crushing it, keep going. Anything I can do to help, I'm here.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, stay inspired, bro. Hella inspired.